When you take one look at Japanese grammar, pitch accent, and kanji, it's very easy to come to the conclusion that Japanese is one of the world's hardest languages to learn from the perspective of an English native speaker. There is something that Japanese has, however, that not many other languages possess. And because of this one thing, it could potentially make the language much easier than we're led to believe. With this, I don't mean to diminish anyone's hard work towards learning Japanese, but rather share a different perspective that hopefully gives some inspiration and motivation to those currently learning, or to those who want to learn but haven't started yet. And to those watching but not interested in learning, wait, why are you watching? So how can Japanese be both the hardest and easiest language to learn? Despite the time-consuming process of learning Japanese grammar, pitch accent, and kanji, that unique thing Japanese has is tons and tons of content. Japanese has anime, manga, video games, visual novels, dramas, movies, music, and a culture that attracts the attention of millions of people across the world. Unfortunately, the issue is that people are getting caught on learning just kanji, pitch accent, and grammar rules, and they never really try to learn from the good, juicy native content that Japanese offers. And when they do try, they don't stick with it long enough, and they just quit after 1, 2, or 3 days. But of course, learning from this kind of native material can be very overwhelming. But that's why I'm such a big fan of learning Japanese from anime, starting from day 1. And to be clear, I'm not saying that everyone should just watch anime for 16 hours a day and never pick up a course book or kanji book. What I'm saying is that forcing yourself to study for 2, 3, 4 hours every single day is going to completely burn you out after 6 months. I've been down that road with Korean many years ago. And you know what? I get it. It's embarrassing to tell people that you learn Japanese from anime because we all know that guy. You know, that guy. Thanks, Darren, for screwing it up for everybody else, huh? But if you prayed to your grammar book in hopes that you won't turn into a weeb before you started learning Japanese from anime, and by that I mean just study for 30 to 60 minutes and then watch a few episodes, you might find that it's incredibly easy to pick up thousands of vocabulary words and grammar structures that are found in everyday Japanese, just by turning off the subtitles and listening in. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You can't actually learn how to speak Japanese by watching anime, right? Well, それはどうでしょうかね。現実には1日に何時間と学ぶことはとても簡単ですが、結局は必要とする日本語に即して学ぶようになります。日本語の字幕を使うと学習を助け、漢字までも学べます。でも日本語の読むために全部常用漢字覚えないといけないかな？絶対違いますよね。Remembering the 漢字という本で800個の漢字を勉強しようとしていましたが、全部やりきることができませんでした。少しでも慰めになるかどうかわからないけど、800個の漢字多くを忘れてしまった。1日に20、30個の漢字を勉強することに実は飽きてしまいました。何か別のものが必要だったんです。何も読む準備はできていないけどな。一番大事なのは始めることでした。その時に見ていたアニメキツネコで日本語の字幕を読みました。それが残りを覚えた方法です。少なくとも常用漢字を。People get caught in this idea that we must complete the full kanji course or the entire grammar book before doing anything else. We have this idea that we need to study super hard for years, and then one day, just magically, we're able to understand native Japanese 100%, no subtitles or translations required. But in reality, reading and listening to native Japanese every single day is how you eventually get to that point. And because Japanese has so much good content you can binge on, it can potentially become the easiest language to immerse yourself in and learn from day in and day out. In other words, while it's going to take native English speakers more time in general to reach the advanced levels of Japanese than, say, Spanish, the mental effort and burden required to reach this point can be significantly much less in Japanese when the language is learned primarily through native materials. You see, without that good content to practice reading and listening in a foreign language, all of this learning becomes meaningless. The truth is, out of millions of people who start learning foreign languages, most just stop learning at some point and quit altogether. For example, I studied Korean for 4 years religiously while living and working as an English teacher in South Korea, but I eventually lost all motivation to continue learning even though I was inside the country and studying that language was my entire life for that whole period. The thing is that Korean has plenty of good content as well, like K-dramas, movies, and comedy shows, and I found it all very interesting. But after 4 years of immersing myself in that country, I had accumulated very little content in particular that I wanted to read or listen to for fun and just for the sake of the content itself. I realized I was reading and listening to all this Korean, but mostly only to learn Korean. What was the point of pushing myself to reach the advanced levels if it had lost all meaning? Just to get some job at some Korean company? Meh. It's true that many people study foreign languages for work-related reasons. They want to build that resume and work in a foreign country and get ahead in their careers. And even then, having some kind of cultural affinity with the language you're studying makes it so much easier. So if you were super into Korean culture or any other foreign culture, you could make the argument that that language is the easiest language to learn. But it just so happens that a lot of people that learn Japanese, like myself, we do it because we're weebs. It's because we're absolutely fascinated by so much of what Japan offers, and as a result, we're naturally interested in learning the language as well. That's because good content in a foreign language gives birth to the reason to start learning it and the ultimate motivation to persist in mastering it. Even if you're someone who's not interested in anime, try not being moved by one of the major films from Studio Ghibli or reading a manga like Death Note. I understand that anime doesn't appeal to a large number of people out there, yet if a guy like Bill Burr can like One Punch Man, there's at least a small chance you might like it as well. So to put everything all together, whether you're interested in learning Japanese or are currently studying, there's going to be some initial effort required in learning the basics to grammar, pitch accent, and kanji. But whenever you find yourself getting continually bored with whatever material you're working through, it doesn't mean that you're lazy nor stupid. In fact, it's a sign from your highly intelligent brain, which is the product of millions of years of evolution, and it's trying to tell you to try something new. Go to the source material that got you interested in learning Japanese in the first place and learn directly from that. If you know the basics of hiragana, katakana, and grammar, you have more than enough to begin your own journey. You can always learn the hard parts along the way. And if learning Japanese from things like anime and video games still seems unrealistic to you personally, to that I say World of Warcraft. Seriously, you'd be surprised at all the different ways millions of people across the world have used to reach a high level of English, including World of Warcraft. There's one story in particular though, which I would like to share with you. This story comes from the world's top Super Smash Bros. Player who goes by the name Zero and who also learned English primarily through video games. In his hometown in Chile, all the video games sold came in English rather than Spanish, so he had to learn English to even be able to play video games while growing up. At just 10 years old, he printed out a 30-page guide in English on how to play the character Falco in the game Super Smash Bros. Melee, and with the help of a dictionary and his sister, he was able to read the entire guide and eventually understand all of it. Now, not only is he considered the best player of the current game, he lives the majority of his life through English. With that story in mind, I'd like to conclude this video with a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. And as always, thanks for watching.